Sentire Media.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of A New Life in Italy, the podcast that explores every aspect of living and investing in this beautiful country. I'm your host, Samantha Wilson, and today we're going to tackle a subject that often confuses and frustrates people looking to buy property in Italy. And that is, why is the Italian real estate market so different from what you might be used to? Well, if you've ever looked at property listings in Italy and wondered why homes seem to stay on the market forever, or why it takes so long to find a really good property, or even why you can't just go online and browse all the available listings in one place, just like you would in the US or in Canada, then this episode is perfect for you. Today, I'm going to break it all down. We are going to cover why properties take so long to sell, why Italy doesn't have an MLS or multiple listing service like North America, and how understanding these differences can actually help you in your property search. Plus, I'll share some key tips to help you navigate the real estate market in Italy, save some money, and make a smart investment. So if you're thinking about buying property in Italy or just curious about how things work here, stick around because we're about to dive in. I'm Samantha Wilson, Chief Dreammaker at smartmoveitaly.com, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show where each week I take you behind the scenes of what it's really like to move to Italy, introduce you to some fascinating people, answer your questions, and show you how starting a new life in Bel Paese is possible for you. Welcome back. Listen, if you are property obsessed like I am, you probably spend hours, if not hours and hours online scrolling through property listings. Like you might be searching different areas even than what you first thought you might like, or different search parameters, even ones that are way outside of your budget or even your needs, because you're always searching for that perfect property that meets not only your needs, but also your dreams. And when you are deep, deep down in that rabbit hole of immobiliare or idealista, you also may have noticed that there are a lot of duplicate listings or ones with conflicting information, questionable photos. Of course, let's not even start to talk about those crazy Italian real estate photos. And of course, you might see the same property listed by a bunch of different agencies. You may have also noticed that some properties seem to sit for months or even years online, seemingly still up for sale. You're probably asking yourself, is it really possible that real estate takes that long to sell in Italy? There must be some kind of explanation. Well, my friends, today I am going to let you in on a few secrets. Well, maybe not really secrets, but definitely things about the Italian property market that many people don't explain or even talk about. And these are the reasons why buying property takes so long or can be so difficult for foreigners, and what you can do to make it easier for yourself if you are headed down that road. I have a lot of experience in buying, renting, selling, and managing properties, not just in Italy, but in all of the countries that I've lived in. Remember, I am property obsessed. Well, more specifically, furniture and sofa obsessed. Honestly, I would much rather buy this amazing sofa than a new pair of Italian shoes. I know, it's crazy, but it's true. I love furniture. I love property, architecture, and design, and it's always been my obsession. And when we opened our sister company, Smart Move Italy Property, which of course is a fully licensed estate agency here in Italy, I have been absolutely in my glory. But real estate in Italy, like most everything else, has its quirks, and we find ourselves explaining these two real major points that I'm going to talk about today over and over. So today I'm going to share the answers. Let's start with the most common one and the most common frustration that people have. And that is, why do properties seem to take so long to sell in Italy? So let's do a little comparison. In North America, properties often sell within weeks or even days, sometimes hours. I remember when we sold our house in Canada, there was literally a lineup of people waiting to get in on the day that we opened it up for sale. And of course, right after we had multiple offers. But this isn't the case in Italy. Now, a good property, of course, that is priced well, is in, a really perfect, amazing location, will also sell fast, maybe not as fast as people lining up for it, but there are a lot of buyers and not a lot of really great properties. In Italy, it's not unusual to see a home sit on the market for several months, even a good house for a few months. But sometimes they can go even longer, even years or several years. And there's three main reasons for this: a bad property, a bad agent, or a bad owner. So what do I mean by all of that? Let's start with a bad property. So a bad property may seem pretty straightforward. The property itself may not be in great condition or, in the right location. Italy is full of beautiful homes, but many of them need significant renovations. And this can be a big deterrent, of course, for buyers, especially foreign buyers if they're not familiar with the costs or the time required, or even have the language and want to dive into an Italian renovation. Plus, homes that are poorly maintained or outdated will naturally sit on the market longer because buyers know that they will have to invest time and money to bring them up to standard, pretty much the same as in your home country. But there's more to a bad property in Italy than just the common stuff like I just mentioned. A bad property in Italy can mean that the property itself is irregular and non-conforming or even abusive. First of all, the main difference in property purchasing in Italy compared to North America, for example, is the required documentation that's needed to legally transfer the title from one owner to another one. In Italy, these include cadastral plans, conformity documents, and a visura, which is like a house birth certificate. And these are just a few of the documents. You need many, many of them. And in a lot of cases, not of course every case, but in many cases, there is something missing or wrong with these needed documents. Almost always there is a conformity issue, even in prices or properties that are really, really high priced. There's always something wrong with the documentation, and usually you can fix it fairly easily, but sometimes you can't. So sometimes the actual house that you see and that you're standing in, like the floor plan, it doesn't match the plans that are registered in the planning office in the comune. And this is one of the most common problems. And this is due to renovations. Remember, properties in Italy are typically really old, generations old. So it's pretty hard to sit in the same place with the same floor plan over generations without wanting to do some kind of work. So the changes that the owner might have done, maybe they've never updated the cadastral plans, those plans that are sitting in the office, and they could have maybe not done that for a few reasons. They didn't have the money to do it, they didn't have the time or the patience or the knowledge, and probably didn't want to pay the tax, if there was any, for the fixes that they did. Now, some of these changes in the documentation can be fixed, and others, though, can be very problematic. For example, even adding a closet or closing in an internal door inside your home needs to be reflected on the cadastral plans for the notaio, who is the official who transfers the deed. If it's not, he or she will have a very big problem. It's not unheard of to go to buy a house and maybe they've just literally closed in a door, nothing major, just closed in a door, and you have to open the whole door up again before you can even buy the house. In extreme cases, properties can be very abusive and impossible to repair. And we see these kinds of issues typically in low-cost homes, like properties under 100,000, or of course, €1 homes. I mean, there's a reason they're priced the way they are, right? I remember one in Sicily, for example. Every time I talk about this, I can picture this house in my head. It was really, really gorgeous in this very small town in the center of Italy. So it was in kind of not the most famous of places anyway, but it was really quite pretty. And the owners had done a nice job renovating, and they actually built this huge wine cellar. It was gorgeous, like, all stone, and it was really something that you would see on a movie set. It was gorgeous. But what they actually did, as we discovered, because our buyers wanted to buy the house, so we start collecting the documents. And what we learned was that this cellar was dug underneath the house and actually out and under the street. So this cellar was actually under the road, clearly without any permissions, probably any safety as well. I mean, obviously it was completely unacceptable and considered completely abusive and could not be sold. Now, this is an extreme example, but we've seen many, many similar issues that can leave a house completely unsellable. It's essentially a toxic asset. To fix the problems will cost the owner significant money, so they just drop the price and hope that someone, sometimes a foreigner, will come along and close their eyes to the problem and buy the problem pretending that it is compliant. Now, how that is done and how they get away with it really is a topic for another show. But if a property is sitting for many, many years and is not sold and it looks kind of nice, chances are there are severe problems with the documentation. So that's a bad property. That's why that house could be for sale for so long. The second reason is the quality of the real estate agent. In other words, a bad agent. In Italy, not all agents are created equal. Unlike North America, there really isn't the same level of training or professional standards across the board. Now, yes, estate agents need to be licensed and go through quite a significant initial training and testing. But after that, there's not a whole lot to do. So some agents may not have the expertise or the marketing skills to showcase a property properly or even speak English well enough to communicate with you. There are some really excellent professional and serious estate agents in Italy, mind you, but there are equally many that are really hard to believe can even survive on their job. And I'm sure if you think about it, if you've even been in this for some time, you have experienced some of these people yourselves. You know, the ones that never respond to you ever, or if they do, they're completely rude, or they lie, or they make things up, and they do pretty much anything for the sale. And obviously, they don't have your best interest at heart. But aside from being bad for you, the foreign buyer, they're really bad for the property owner. And they can always be the reason for the property not selling. Now, I'll give you another example. Very recently, we have been looking for a little property in Puglia, just to use as a tourist rental and investment property. And I'm talking very recently, we found this perfect property in one of our favorite towns down there. And we noticed that it had been for sale for over a year, or it looked like it was for sale for over a year. So on first look, it was clearly not the property because it was completely renovated. And we know that it was done with special government grants for touristic accommodations, like a B&B accommodations. And in order to get those grants, we know that the documentations have to be in order. So it's not a bad property. That's not the reason it's been for sale for so long. So we thought, I wonder what the reason is. Perhaps it's the agent. So the pursuit ensued, and that's the best way that I can say it. It's because it's almost like an endless chase for the agent to respond or to give you any sense of information that you need in order to move forward. So after many calls and some, were answered, some WhatsApp messages were answered with promises to send us further information, but they never did. They never follow up. There was really no assistance at all and actually really quite rude. So after many attempts to just even get the floor plans and further details, because we didn't want to make this trip all the way down to Puglia for a site visit if we couldn't, get the background before we went. The owner, by the way, is probably wondering why his property is not selling well. Well, in this case, it's definitely the agent. And we just walked away, obviously, because, we're not going to waste our time with somebody like this. Unfortunately, he is the only agent on that property. So, it is what it is. Now, if you get one of these situations, you can do one of two things. You can continue to pursue the bad agent, and you can hope for the best. Remember, you are going to have to go down a long road with this person, so you have to consider that in the whole scenario. Or the second choice is just give up and continue searching for something else. Your time frame, your tolerance level will determine which choice is best for you. And I think you can assume what my choice was. So that leads me to the third reason why properties stay for sale for so long. And that's because it could be the owner that's the problem. So it's not necessarily a bad house or a bad agent, but a bad owner. In Italy, many property owners have emotional attachments to their homes, especially if the property has been in the family for generations, and many of them have been. Or maybe there are many, many owners on one single property, all of whom can't agree on a lot of things, let alone the offer or the selling price. Some may not even be speaking to each other, for example, or they may be there may be back taxes that they don't want to trigger, they don't want to draw attention to, and certainly don't want to pay. So all of these stories or all of these this kind of inside knowledge can lead to owners simply just not responding to anyone, not responding to your offer, not responding to the agent, just staying quiet. The question is, why do they even try to sell their house in the first place? And often it's just one of the parties that will put this house up for sale thinking they just want to be rid of it once and for all. But getting everyone together is really difficult. And or we also see owners that maybe are interested in selling, but some reason further as it gets closer and closer to actually making the deal or doing the sale, they change their minds at the last minute. And if there's an emotional attachment to the property, this can make them also very unrealistic about the price that they're asking. This is one of the more frustrating things. And that is because there are no comparables to convince the owner of the correct price. So it becomes an emotional decision. And often owners will just refuse to negotiate a lower price, even if the property isn't selling, because to them, the value is a certain amount. It doesn't matter what a buyer is willing to pay. And we find that owners tend to price their property based on the investment that they made originally or even ongoing. So even if the property is depreciated over the years, they will argue that they paid, let's say, $200,000 for it. No matter that it's not worth that now, they want at least $2,000 and $200,000 or a little bit more for it. They can't seem to understand that there is movement in the market. So between properties that are irregular, agents who aren't always up to the task, and owners who are holding out for their dream price, it's no surprise that properties can sit on the market for a very long time. So if you see one that looks interesting and you notice that it has been for sale for many months or even years, it is likely due to one of those three reasons I just mentioned. Now that we have that settled and that big pending question is what's wrong with this property? Why hasn't it sold yet? Let's dive into another great big question, which is something that is a contributor to the difficulty in finding a property, the search problem. And that is because there is no MLS in Italy. Now, I know some of you entrepreneurial thinkers out there are getting really excited right now because you're thinking, just somebody hasn't created an MLS system, which is a multiple listing service. In Italy, nobody's done it. My goodness, what a great business opportunity. Well, let me tell you before you get too excited to hang on, because trust me, creating an Italian MLS, multiple listing system or service here in Italy has already been considered. It's been heavily evaluated and honestly completely discarded. And here's why. There are three main reasons an MLS will not work in Italy, and as a result, force you or your agent to comb through countless websites in search of your dream property. So the number one reason is that there is very little agency collaboration, cold agency collaboration. Real estate agents in Italy rarely collaborate with one another like they do in North America. In North America, agents typically work together. One agent has the listing of the property and the other agent brings in the buyer, and together they split the commission. But in Italy, it's a lot more complicated. Yeah, surprise, surprise. So first, let's remember that commissions in Italy are paid by both the seller and the buyer, usually about 4% on each side. And listing agents may agree not to take commission from the owner, and certainly they'll do this in low-cost homes, but instead insist on taking the commission only from the buyer. And this is almost always the case, always, at least for €1 homes, but really low-cost homes for obvious reasons, because there's almost no room for an agent to make any money on a home. Let's say it's only €50,000. So as a result, agents tend to work independently, and they will show you only the properties that they have for sale and the ones that they know that they will either get commission from both the seller and you, or at least one side. So this will answer the question when you go to see an agent, you tell them what your search criteria is. They just say, there's only 2 properties, which is impossible to believe. You could be in a huge area and you say, there's only 2 2-bedroom properties for sale. You know there's more. But traditionally, agencies and agents don't search through other agency websites. This is always left to just buyers agencies like ours or property finders, for example, who work with lots of different markets. Well, we have collaborators all over Italy. That takes a lot of time and a lot of years to build relationships in order to access their properties. So typically, you'll have to contact multiple agencies or do a lot of searching yourself to get a full picture of really what's available. And if agencies don't collaborate, there is no point in having a main database like an MLS where everyone can search and the agents can work together, because they just simply won't. Now, the second reason an MLS will not work in Italy is because there's really no consistency on how properties are listed. Every agent or agency has, of course, their own way of presenting a property, and you might see different information or details for the same house depending on who's listing it. So there's also this problem with English-speaking language with many of the agencies, especially if you're looking in smaller towns. Google Translate, for example, inside those websites, they may not relay the property description or properly, right? So that what you're looking at is not really what they're saying in Italian. The way it's translated doesn't give you the full description properly. Or agents just simply leave out a bulk of the details, hoping that you will contact them, because remember, they're looking to get commission from both sides. Now, this is, of course, assuming that if you do contact them, that they'll reply, because we don't know for sure if that will happen. Now, this lack of standardization can make it harder to compare properties or even figure out basic information like square footage or the condition of the home. And we get asked a lot about comparables. How much would this property, what's the value of this property compared to another similar property? What was it sold for, another property? So you can tell, whether or not you're paying the right price. Well, unfortunately, because there's no MLS and no database that we can look at to do those comparables, it's mostly just based on the knowledge of the agent as well as knowing the property market in that location. So forcing agents to conform to listing guidelines inside of an MLS is honestly an impossible task. And the third reason that an MLS will not work is because there is really almost no exclusivity in Italy. So when it comes to listing a property in North America, as you know, an agent often has an exclusive contract for a limited time to sell a home, meaning that no one else can list it. Therefore, if you see it on the MLS, then your agent connects with the seller's agent and the work begins. This is why it's so valuable, obviously, in North America to get as many listings as you can, because you always know you have one side of the deal. But in Italy, it's common for multiple agents to list the same property, sometimes at different prices or with different information. And this can be really confusing for buyers, and it also contributes to the long selling times that we talked about earlier. You see, if there is a few agents on one property, one agent might decide to drop the price just a little bit in his advertising in order to attract the buyers, because the buyer obviously is going to want to contact, naturally, the lower price listing. So there's a lot of deception out there, which can lead to confusion and, of course, risks when you're buying. So without exclusivity, consistency, and most importantly, standardized collaboration, an MLS system in Italy will absolutely fail. Instead, we have to rely on larger web portals like eMobiliare and Idealista or Casa.it. And there's some other ones out there that a lot of people do use. Now, all of this means that finding a property in Italy takes just more time and effort than it does in North America. You need to be prepared to search multiple sources, check lots of listings with different agencies, and do a lot of legwork yourself, or of course, have someone work for you. Now, all these things contribute to a slow and a very often frustrating process. But here's a few final tips for anyone considering buying a property in Italy. And the first tip I give you is use a buyer's agency who can act as a property finder. Now, this isn't because we have a buyer's agency. Choose whatever buyer's agency you want, but try to choose one, because if you are, especially if you're not here, if you're trying to search before you arrive, you really do need somebody who can break down those walls and start pestering and start getting through to the agents, and also to narrow down the properties that are actually good and not bad properties, and owners that are actually good and willing to sell. So you're not wasting all of your time when you come here for your viewing trip. I highly recommend working with a buyer's agency because they work exclusively on your behalf and help you find the best properties. They also negotiate the deals, handle all the legal paperwork. They can save you a ton of time and, of course, frustration, especially if you're unfamiliar with the market. And this is because they act as your own. Think of them like your own MLS. They're doing the legwork. They're finding the collaborations and weeding out the bad properties, agents, and owners for you. So choose whatever buyer's agency you want, but choose one. Now, the next one is, the second tip I have for you is to budget for additional costs. So buying property in Italy, of course, comes with other costs beyond the purchase price, like taxes and notary fees and maybe renovations or repairs. I always suggest about 10% of the purchase price you should put aside or think about putting aside for these closing costs. And so you make sure you factor those into your overall budget. And if you're using a buyer's agency, you typically will only pay commission to them. So remember that 4% commission that the buyer pays. Typically with a buyer's agency, you pay that 4% commission to your agent, not to the other agent. So you don't normally pay twice. You just pay the same commission that you would normally, but to your agent. However, if you use a property finder or a property finding service, which, by the way, are not licensed estate agencies, you will often have to pay money to them in addition to the full commission. So buyer's agencies, you just pay the commission that you would have to pay anyway. And property finders, often you have to pay them a few €1,000 just to do the work for you, plus the commission. And they're not licensed, so be careful about that. And then the third thing, of course, the third little tip to leave you with is factor in the extra time. Everything in Italy takes time, just a little bit longer than what you probably expect. Just tack on double that, and then you'll sort of be in the right space. And the final tip for you is to factor in extra time. Everything in Italy tends to take a little bit longer, and real estate is absolutely no exception. Don't think you can find a house, make an offer, and move in a month. It just doesn't happen. So whether it's finding the right property, getting through the buying process, or completing your renovations, expect delays every single step of the way. I always find that if you prepare for the worst, everything else is okay. So always add several months to your timeline, and then anything faster will feel like a win. So in closing, despite the challenges, Italy really does remain an incredible place to invest in real estate. You can really do very well with a touristic rental, or even over time with your own property that you can enjoy yourself and have in your family for many, many years. The country's got rich history, as you already know, and beautiful landscapes and many places to choose from. It makes it a desirable destination for both living and coming here, obviously, on vacation. And right now, Italy's property market is a really good opportunity, especially if you're willing to look beyond the cities and explore these smaller and rural areas. There's some amazing deals to be had still. If you approach the process with a lot of patience and you do your research, and you work with the right people, then buying a property in Italy can really be a rewarding, both financially and mentally, and a very sound investment. And now that you have these little nuggets of information, the process may just be a little bit easier. It's time for listener questions. Just like the old radio call-in shows, my team has picked 3 listener questions, all left on our voicemail. I have no idea what these questions are, but I haven't been stumped yet. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Hi, Samantha. I'm claiming my Italian citizenship through a court case. Do you know around how long that takes? Thanks.
Well, congratulations on trying to get your Italian citizenship. You've probably heard me say this before, that I think it's like winning the lottery, because not only will your citizenship give you access to Italy, but also the entire European Union. So the reason I'm telling you this is because the wait will be worth it, I promise. And there will be a wait, unfortunately. Applying for Italian citizenship, there's a few different routes that you can go. Obviously, you are choosing the 1948 path. This is because you're going through a female ancestor that had to pass her citizenship on before 1948. And there's 2 parts to the application process. The first one is to collect all of your documents to support the petition for your citizenship here in Italy. And then the second part is going to court, actually, and then, of course, waiting for the decision. Typically, a standard application, let's say maybe 2 generations that you're getting the documents for, can be anywhere between 8 months to a year to get the documents in order. And then the court case, writing the petition and actually going to court and getting a decision probably can be around the same amount. Well, actually more, about 1 to 2 years to finish that up. So in total, your application time, hopefully, in best case scenarios, is about 3 years if you're starting from scratch. Now that in comparison to a consulate case, which can take even 2 years or more just to get an appointment, obviously going to court is usually the faster way these days. And if you have a line that you are thinking you can only go to a consulate, but maybe there is a possibility to go to court, I suggest you look at that other line to see if it is possible, because again, it'll be a lot faster. I hope that helps.
Hi Samantha, this is Nikki. I want to work and find a job, but I don't know if it's possible.
Hi, Farah. Thanks for the question. Well, it really depends on your situation and what you want to do. And I know you've already said that you want to move to Italy and you want to work or find a job. So this is going to be difficult if you do not already have a job or you are self-employed, like a remote worker or self-employed, because finding work in Italy, just moving here or trying to find an employer to hire you and move you to Italy is almost impossible these days, unless you are highly skilled, which I'm not sure what your skill set is. If you are a doctor or, a technician or some other highly skilled worker, there are some companies that might be able to successfully apply for an EU blue card in order to get you in and work for them. But again, it depends on your background and what kind of job you are looking for. If you fall within that guideline in the EU blue card, then there's actually a website that you can go to. You can just Google EU blue card visa. And I think it's apply.eu. And there is a section on there where you can actually add your resume and put a little posting on there to see if employers are looking for you. Not just in Italy, by the way. The EU blue card visa is good for all of the European Union. So if this is your case, if you are falling within that range, this is a great way to start. Otherwise, you really need to focus on perhaps getting a remote job already somewhere else, build up your experience and your contracts, and then make sure that you have permission to move to Italy. As long as you have a degree, you could potentially apply for the new digital nomad visa. Hope that helps.
Hi, Sam. Jeremy here. I'm ready to make an offer on a house, but the agent is telling us we need to have an Italian bank account to buy a house, but we can't open one. Do you have any suggestions? What can we do to make this happen? Thanks. Looking forward to your response.
This is a very common question, and I think that the reason that people think they need to open a bank account in Italy in order to buy a house is because a lot of agents will tell them they need to do this because what they need is a check, like a regular bank check for the deposit. Often what happens when you make a proposal to buy a home, you have to give the deposit in a check to the agent, and the agent holds on to that check until the conditions are removed, at which point they give that check directly to the owner, and the owner gets to cash it. But of course, if you don't have an Italian bank account, then you can't write this check. So often agents just don't understand foreign purchases or foreign buyer situations, but you do not need to have a bank account. As a matter of fact, you can send that deposit in escrow to either a notary, the notary that you will eventually use to close the sale of the house and transfer the deed, or a commercialista, which is an Italian accountant if they have this services. So this is one way you can do it, is you can send the deposit. It's held in escrow. It'll cost you a little bit of money. It's a percentage of the amount of the deposit. I think in law it can't be more than 800 euros, but that's obviously for a very large deposit. But otherwise, it's quite possible to do that without a bank account. And besides, you won't be able to open a bank account in Italy, typically unless you have residency. So if your agent is insisting that you have a bank account, just tell them, look, I can send my money through escrow into the notaio who can hold it and then release it. As long as you understand there will be a fee. Hope that helps. Well, that's all for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about visas, citizenship, property, and well, really anything about moving to Italy that you would like me to answer in an upcoming episode, please feel free to send us a voicemail at our website at smartmoveitaly.com/podcast, or just click on the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and remember, you can find all of the resources and the links to the people and the places that I mentioned in this episode inside the show notes. Ciao for now. A New Life in Italy podcast is a production of Sentire Media, created and hosted by me, Samantha Wilson. Production by London Nero, and with special thanks to Ali Frothingham, Sofia Pisana, and the entire team at Sentire. Follow A New Life in Italy wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you're thinking of moving to Italy, whether full-time, part-time, or for a lifetime, come and see me over at smartmoveitaly.com and we'll help you get here and start living your best life. And don't forget, if you love this episode, please rate and leave a review. It's much appreciated. I can't wait to meet up with you again next week, same time, same place. Ciao for now.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.